Under the dazzling lights of Hollywood, the nearly two-decade love story between Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban was once considered one of the most beautiful and enduring romances in showbiz. They always appeared perfect, radiant smiles on red carpets, affectionate glances, heartfelt tributes, making the world believe they had truly found their happily ever after amidst the temptations of fame. But then, everything changed. When Nicole finally stepped back into the public eye after filing for divorce, people realized the fairy tale had come to an end. The glow that once surrounded them was gone, replaced by a quiet composure and a trace of sadness in her eyes. The love that once seemed eternal could no longer survive the weight of time and fame. And after the truth broke, there was no silence, only a storm of emotion. Keith chose to face the heartbreak through his music. On stage, he sang as if pouring out every wound in his soul, each lyric soaked in pain, letting the audience feel the cracks hidden behind the spotlight. Nicole, true to her nature, chose quiet grace. She didn't speak out, didn't blame, she simply moved forward, letting her actions speak louder than words. This wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was a collision between love, fame, and sacrifice. What the world saw, the smiles, the hand-holding, the tender kisses under the cameras, was only the surface of a much deeper, more complex story, one filled with emotions hidden away from the public eye. And to understand why a love that once seemed flawless fell apart, we have to go back to where it all began. Nicole Kidman wasn't born under the bright lights of Hollywood. She came into the world in 1967, in Honolulu, Hawaii, while her Australian parents were living abroad. Her childhood was a blend of discipline, intellect, and creativity. Her father, a psychologist and biochemist, instilled in her curiosity, structure, and a passion for discovery. Her mother, a nurse and educator, gave her empathy, imagination, and emotional warmth. Even as a child, Nicole was different, a quiet girl with bright eyes and a deep way of observing the world. In a home filled with books, music, and intellectual conversation, she developed a rich inner world, where reason and emotion intertwined in harmony. And from that world emerged Nicole Kidman, a dreamer with the heart of a fighter, a woman who sought truth and emotion and depth in every role she played. To truly understand why her love story with Keith Urban unraveled, we must begin here, with the girl who was born from intellect, art, and a quiet loneliness. When the Kidman family finally returned to Sydney, Nicole's true self began to emerge, but not in the glamorous, confident way you'd expect from a future Hollywood legend. She wasn't bold, she wasn't outspoken. In fact, she was painfully shy. Her teachers would later recall how Nicole blushed crimson whenever her name was called in class, so nervous she could barely get a word out. The idea of attention terrified her. It was as if every pair of eyes in the room weighed her down. Yet beneath that quiet, fragile surface lay a mind bursting with imagination, a hidden force just waiting for the right moment to break free. Nicole first found solace in ballet, losing herself in the rhythm and discipline of movement. But soon, she discovered something that spoke to her even deeper: acting. It began with simple drama classes, then small roles in community theater. And under the soft glow of stage lights, something magical happened. Nicole realized that acting wasn't about pretending. It was freedom. It gave her a voice when shyness stole her words, a place where fear couldn't reach her. On stage, she could be anyone: brave, fierce, unstoppable. By her teenage years, that spark had turned into a blazing fire. The Australian film scene was growing fast, and Nicole seized every chance that came her way: commercials, TV spots, student films, anything to keep the dream alive. Then, at just 16 years old, she landed her breakout role in BMX Bandits, a vibrant 80s cult classic that showcased her raw talent and magnetic screen presence. Audiences were captivated by her, the tall, porcelain-skinned girl with the kind eyes and unshakable authenticity. It didn't take long for Hollywood to notice. The once timid girl who could barely raise her hand in class was suddenly being called the next big thing. But with fame came new challenges: pressure, scrutiny, the constant balancing act between ambition and vulnerability. The same girl who once trembled before a classroom now stood before cameras and crowds of thousands, trying to stay true to herself in a world that rarely allowed for weakness. That fragile vulnerability would come to define everything about Nicole Kidman, not just the role she chose, but the way she lived, loved, and lost. Because while the world was falling in love with the radiant actress on screen, Nicole herself was still searching for love, for belonging, for a family she could finally call her own. And that search would soon lead her into a relationship that brought her everything she thought she wanted, and took from her more than she ever imagined. Long before Keith Urban entered the picture, there was another man who changed Nicole's life forever. It was the late 1980s, and her career was exploding. Hollywood had taken notice of the striking young actress from Australia, her performances fierce, fearless, and impossible to ignore. And it was during that meteoric rise that she met Tom Cruise, then the most powerful movie star in the world. Their love story played out like something from a Hollywood script. They married in 1990, instantly becoming the golden couple, young, famous, impossibly beautiful. To the outside world, they were perfection. Two stars burning at the same brilliant height. But behind the flashbulbs and red carpets, cracks began to form, quiet, invisible, and growing deeper by the day. At the center of those cracks was Scientology, the controversial faith that Tom devoted himself to. Nicole rarely spoke of it publicly, but later accounts hinted that the religion's influence shadowed much of their marriage, shaping their private lives and slowly driving a wedge between them. By 2001, the dream had ended. Their marriage collapsed. Their two adopted children, Isabella and Connor, remained mostly with Tom, a heartbreak that shattered Nicole's world. Though she carried herself with elegance and restraint, those close to her knew the truth: she was broken. The separation from her children was an ache she would carry for years, a wound she spoke of only in fragments. For a woman who had always longed for stability, this loss was more than emotional, it was spiritual. It reshaped her understanding of love, of motherhood, and of resilience. While Nicole was silently rebuilding her life, on the other side of the world, another story was unfolding, one that would one day collide with hers in the most unexpected way. In the suburbs of Australia, a boy named Keith Lionel Urban was fighting his own battles. Born in Whangarei, New Zealand, and raised in Australia, Keith found refuge in music when home life turned tense. The guitar became his escape, his weapon, his lifeline. By the time he was 6, he was already strumming chords with a focus far beyond his years. Country music wasn't popular in Australia, but for Keith, it became a language of survival. Through every family argument, every moment of uncertainty, the music gave him purpose. Financial struggles and household tensions only fueled his determination. By his teens, he was performing in smoky bars and small-town talent shows, the brooding outsider with undeniable talent. Behind the charming smile and electrifying stage presence, though, Keith was already battling demons, addiction, loneliness, and the fear of losing control. Yet through it all, he kept playing. Every note, every song was a way to fight back, to keep his dream alive. Neither of them knew it then, the shy girl from Sydney and the restless boy with a guitar, but their paths were already being written toward each other. Two wounded souls, shaped by loss and longing, destined to meet, and to ignite a love story that would both heal and haunt them. Behind the charm, the talent, and that voice that could silence a room, Keith Urban was fighting a private war. The crowd saw energy, confidence, and charisma, but when the lights went out, he was a man haunted by addiction and loneliness. Fame, instead of saving him, only magnified the chaos. On stage, he was a storm of fire and emotion. Off stage, he was a soul caught in a battle he could barely control. By his 20s, Keith had already fallen into the dangerous spiral of alcohol and drugs. The higher he climbed, the darker the nights became. Every success came with a price, and every applause was followed by silence too heavy to bear. By the time he crossed paths with Nicole Kidman in 2005, he had already checked in and out of rehab more than once. To the world, he was electric, but inside, he was barely holding on. And maybe it was that fragility, that raw, wounded honesty, that drew Nicole to him. She didn't just see a rock star, she saw a man searching for balance, fighting the same invisible pain she once knew. She understood brokenness, and so did he. When their worlds collided, it didn't feel like coincidence, it felt like destiny. Two souls with scars, finding recognition in each other's eyes. Fate chose its moment. January 2005. the Day USA Gala in Los Angeles. A night meant to celebrate Australians who had conquered America. Nicole arrived like royalty, poised, glowing, untouchable. Keith stood off to the side, the country boy with a guitar, quietly observing the room. Their first meeting wasn't cinematic. Nicole would later confess that she thought he wasn't interested. He took her number, and never called. But destiny has its own timing. Months later, when Keith finally reached out, everything changed. The connection was instant, magnetic, real. By May, they were inseparable. By the end of that same year, Nicole would call him the man who swept me off my feet. Keith was everything Tom Cruise wasn't. Where Tom had been disciplined, precise, almost untouchable, Keith was wild, messy, and heartbreakingly real. He was flawed, unpredictable, yet alive in a way that drew her in completely. For Nicole, he was freedom. For Keith, she was calm, a reflection of grace and stability he had never known. By late 2005, the world couldn't look away. Their love wasn't a fling, it was a storm, passionate, fragile, and fierce all at once. And on June 25, 2006, it reached its fairy tale peak. The wedding took place at the Cardinal Soretti Memorial Chapel on Sydney's Manly Peninsula. The scene was pure magic, hundreds of candles flickering softly, violins whispering through the air, and Nicole walking down the aisle in a breathtaking Balenciaga gown, her veil glowing under the golden light. Witnesses said she fought back tears with every step. At the altar, Keith waited, guitar in hand, heart full, ready to sing to the woman who had changed his life. His song melted every heart in the room. For the media, it was a storybook ending. Hollywood royalty marrying country soul. Photos of the ceremony flooded the world, and everyone believed they were watching a miracle. Nicole, finally finding peace after heartbreak. Keith, finding redemption in love's embrace. They were crowned the golden couple, the proof that love could heal, that two damaged hearts could become whole together. But what no one saw that night, behind the vows, the beauty, and the promises, were the shadows that still lingered. The demons that never truly left. Because in the world of fame, love, and fragile hearts, even the most perfect fairy tales can be haunted by the past. But like every fairy tale wrapped in candlelight and champagne, the glow didn't last forever. Beneath the music, the smiles, and the glimmering perfection, cracks had already begun to form. Just 4 months after their wedding, Keith voluntarily checked himself into rehab for alcohol addiction. A shocking twist that shattered the illusion of their newlywed bliss. The world was stunned. Nicole, still basking in the afterglow of her dream wedding, suddenly found herself facing a nightmare. The tabloids pounced. Headlines screamed betrayal, addiction, and heartbreak. The golden couple, that had once symbolized hope, was now being rewritten as tragedy. Keith was painted as the reckless musician, Nicole as the woman who loved too deeply. But while the world speculated, Nicole stayed silent, and she stayed present. She visited him in rehab, stood by him quietly, and chose loyalty over image. Keith would later say, "She saved my life." And in many ways, she did. For him, Nicole wasn't just a wife. She was his anchor, his proof that love could heal. But behind closed doors, the truth was far more complicated. Nicole had already lived through one great heartbreak, a marriage she couldn't save. This time, she was determined to rewrite the ending. Maybe it wasn't just love that kept her there. Maybe it was the need to prove that she could hold her world together. To the public, they became a symbol of resilience, two lovers who had survived the storm. But within the walls of their perfect home, a quiet imbalance was taking root. Nicole became the caretaker, the protector, the one who held everything steady. Keith, though devoted, was still the one who needed saving. Their love was real, but it was heavy, built as much on healing as on happiness. In time, the couple seemed to reclaim their light. Nicole returned to the screen with powerful, emotional performances in Australia and Rabbit Hole, while Keith conquered the music charts, earning Grammys and global acclaim. On red carpets, they smiled hand in hand, their chemistry glowing under the flash of cameras, as if all the pain had long been washed away. But behind those perfect pictures lay a quieter truth. Fame demanded distance. While Nicole filmed in Europe, Keith was on tour across America. They made promises, never more than 3 weeks apart, but real life often had other plans. The spaces between them grew wider, filled not with arguments, but with silence, the kind that slowly, quietly changes everything. For Nicole, family had always been sacred, perhaps because of what she had lost. After years of distance from her adopted children with Tom Cruise, she was determined to never let separation define her again. When she and Keith welcomed their daughters, Sunday Rose in 2008 and Faith Margaret in 2010, she poured her heart into motherhood. Home became her refuge, her second chance. Keith adored his children, but fatherhood came with its own turbulence. The touring life, bright lights, endless travel, late nights, clashed with the structure Nicole craved. She sought peace and predictability. He thrived in motion and chaos. Their worlds, though intertwined, often pulled in opposite directions. Still, in public, they were flawless, the picture of devotion and balance. Nicole at the airport with her girls, Keith by her side with luggage in hand. Those images became symbols of modern love holding strong against Hollywood's odds. But what no one saw beyond the camera flash was the truth, that behind the tenderness, there was tension, behind the stability, exhaustion. Their marriage, once a grand romance, had quietly evolved into a delicate negotiation between closeness and distance, duty and freedom, love and survival. And while the world still believed in their unbreakable bond, the first quiet seeds of future tension had already been planted, growing in silence, waiting for their moment to bloom. Rough the late 2000s and into the 2010s, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban seemed untouchable, two stars who had somehow found the secret to lasting love in an industry built on fleeting moments. Every red carpet appearance, every tender glance, and every emotional acceptance speech painted the same picture, a marriage that had survived everything: fame, addiction, distance, and come out stronger. Nicole often called Keith the man who brought her back to life, while Keith, ever the romantic, would choke up on stage thanking her for being his rock. To millions watching, they weren't just a couple, they were proof that love could truly conquer all. But behind those dazzling smiles and perfect portraits, the story was far more complex. The same traits that once drew them together were quietly pulling them apart. Nicole's deep longing for stability clashed with Keith's restless need for freedom. To the outside world, they were balance and harmony. But inside their marriage, that balance sometimes tipped too far. Nicole carried much of the emotional weight, steady, grounded, the protector. Keith, passionate but unpredictable, often found himself playing the role of the one who needed saving. He adored her strength, yet sometimes felt eclipsed by it. She loved his vulnerability, yet feared that it could one day shatter the fragile peace they'd built. Their love was real, but it was also work. Parenthood magnified the differences between them. Nicole thrived on structure and routine, determined to shield their daughters from the chaos of fame. Keith, ever the artist, brought spontaneity and warmth, the kind of father who'd turn bedtime into a concert. Their girls adored both sides of that world, but insiders whispered of tension behind the smiles. Nicole sometimes felt like the serious one, Keith the carefree one, and in between them lay an unspoken friction neither wanted to name. Still, in public, the golden couple image never wavered. They laughed, they touched, they looked at each other with that practiced sparkle. To everyone watching, the fairy tale still lived on. By the mid-2010s, though, the cracks began to show. Tabloids picked up on subtle changes. Keith seen without his wedding ring, Nicole attending events solo, rumors of arguments over schedules and priorities. Anonymous sources whispered about distance and different worlds. But every time speculation rose, they responded with elegance and poise. Nicole told interviewers calmly, "We've never been stronger." Keith echoed her words, calling her his anchor, his love, his reason. The world believed them, because everyone wanted to. Yet those close to the couple saw what the cameras didn't. Nicole's effortless grace had begun to look like exhaustion. Keith's grand public declarations started to sound rehearsed. The love was still there, but holding it together had become a performance of its own. Every red carpet kiss, every whispered joke, every perfectly timed handhold, it all felt choreographed, not out of deceit, but out of sheer determination to keep the
to
fairy
rehab
tale
for
alive.
substance abuse.
By
It was a scary
2023
time,
and
and he later
2024,
admitted
the
he
rumors
worried he
had
had
reached
blown
a
our
fever
marriage to
pitch.
smithereens.
Reports
But
claimed
Nicole
they were
stood by
living
him.
separate
Something
lives,
he said saved his
their
life.
schedules no longer
If you want to
overlapping,
see what love in
their
action
smiles
really looks
growing
like,
rarer.
give that a whirl,
Photos
he
of
said
solo
years later.
appearances only
They came
fueled
out
the
filming
speculation,
all over the world,
yet they
and
held
Kidman
on
talked,
to each
suggesting
other,
they were
to
living
their
separate
image,
lives.
to the story
Then
they
there were
had
the
built
moments
over
the
2
story came out
decades.
from a model
But
who
even the
claimed a
strongest
long-term affair
facades
with him.
can't
The
withstand
couple
time
never
and
acknowledged
truth
it,
forever.
and the story faded.
And by
More
2025,
where Nicole
that
cupped
truth could no longer
Keith's
be
face
hidden.
in front of the
The
camera.
fairy
More
tale that
recently,
once
at the
inspired
2000
millions was
of their
finally
demanding
reaching its
careers.
final chapter.
With Nicole,
Not with scandal or fury, but with the quiet, inevitable heartbreak of 2 people who had loved deeply, fought hard, and, in the end, simply couldn't hold on any longer.